I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Thursday. We are now finally in September, and that for me has always meant the very beginnings of the Mabon season. So I thought that on Thursdays we would go through a few preparatory videos so that we are all geared up for the Sabbat later on in this month. But rather than doing one great big long video where we get into all the details at the same time, I thought we could just take this by chunks. And so today's video is all going to be about the themes associated with Mabon. And we'll begin with the significance of the autumnal equinox. The autumnal equinox, what we have are about 3 days in a row in which we have an equal number of daylight and nighttime hours. And from that point we have an increasing progression of more and more darkness, less and less light, until we get to the solstice. For me, this always begins the dark half of the year, and it runs from Mabon into Ostara, when of course the light half of the year takes back over. Now my justification is for this is that when you have more dark than you do light, then that would be the dark half of the year. And of course, conversely, more light than dark, then that is the light half. However, this does vary from tradition to tradition and person to person. There are many people who consider the solstices to be the markers. From the summer solstice to the winter, that would be the dark half of the year because the amount of light is decreasing. And then from the winter solstice to the summer, light half of the year because the light is increasing. And still other people go from Beltane to Samhain. Then you have the light half, and then Samhain to Beltane, which would be the dark half. I would suggest to you to, especially if you've never considered, how you divide up the year yourself, is to listen to the various arguments in favor of each of these viewpoints. And I would also say, don't just pick whatever one seems most popular or trendy. Think about people's reasoning, why they consider certain markers to set off the dark half of the year to the light half, and think about what actually makes sense to you and what feels right. I'm not super big on our emotions making decisions for us. However, this is one of those things where it is about feeling the energies of the year and knowing within yourself, we are transitioning into this part of it. On the autumnal equinox, we also have the sun going into the sign of Libra. And Libra is all about balancing. You will even see Libra's, one of the symbols associated with it are the scales of justice. And this is very good symbolism for what the equinox is all about. It also tells us that it's time to move into a more rational way of thinking, consider careful planning, giving proper consideration to everything. And of course, one of the reasons for that is because we are headed into winter. Now, most of us in the modern world are better positioned to survive winter just fine than any of our ancestors were. But it does remain the fact that, bills go up in the winter, there are other obligations, travel becomes more dangerous, and of course with more dangerous travel, that means other things could happen with, as far as injury goes. There tends to be a little bit more sickness going around. So there is a lot to think about as we go into this part of the year so that we come through it well. Now the next thing we'll discuss is the death of the god. Now in Wicca, most traditions either consider the god departing from the mortal realm into the underworld either at Lunasa or Mabon. For me, it's always made sense that it is Mabon at which he really does make his descent into the otherworld. Because at this point, he has really and truly poured out the very last of his energies into the crops that were to be harvested. He has transitioned from the point of midlife into old age. He's far more wizened, and his metaphorical physical being is beginning to be ready to let go and to move on. Now, once he goes into the underworld at Mabon, what happens there is that he takes up his throne, and if he's there, he's taking care of those who have died, particularly within the last year. He's there to greet them, and things of that nature. He has a different set of duties for this period of time, before he, of course, is reborn at Yule. And this completion of his journey, it really mirrors our physical mortality, and really that's what the Wheel of the Year is all about. It's showing us through the seasons and through the journey of the gods what our own life expectancy really is like. We have the time of our birth, youth, coming of age, maturity, midlife, old age, death, period of time in the other world before being reborn once again, and it keeps flowing in this cycle. Whereas with the goddess, at this time of year, she is becoming the widow. She's entering a sort of period of mourning, and this of course mirrors the loss of summer, the coming of winter, and she's also transforming herself more into the image of the crone. Now, because she has yet to give birth to the reborn god at Yule, she still has that aspect of the expectant mother. And the thing to keep in mind about the goddess, because you might think, well, how could she be the expectant mother and be taking on the mantle of the crone all at the same time? And the reason, of course, is because these are all metaphors that apply. It is how we visualize her, rather than taking things too literally. She has both of these duties going on. She has been aging, metaphorically, alongside the god, but she still has this other final duty to fulfill, which is to have him reborn and bring him back into the world when that time comes. Nevertheless, as the season progresses and we start seeing the changing of the leaves, the last of the harvest being gathered in, the energy of the goddess is waning. You can tell she's getting ready to join the god in the underworld. Now, unlike the god who experiences metaphorical death, the goddess does not. And she symbolizes our enduring spirit, that no matter how many physical incarnations we may have, it is the core self within that keeps coming back again and again. And the goddess's journey is part of what helps us understand the more energetic and spiritual aspects of our existence. Now, the fourth theme that I'll touch on very briefly, because I'm going to be discussing the god Mabon and his mother, the goddess Modron, throughout the month of September, so I don't want to get too far into their mythologies when I'm just going to be repeating it in other videos. But suffice it to say, Mabon was considered to be the divine youth. He was the great sun, and he was born to a goddess called Modron, who was called the Great Mother. And now 3 days after his birth, he was taken prisoner, and he was held at a place called Caer Lau, which is also a synonym for the otherworld. So we have someone taken into the otherworld and being separated from the mother. Now, this is the closest thing in probably Celtic or even Germanic mythologies that really mirrors the tale of Persephone, Demeter, and Hades, in which Persephone descends into the underworld for a period of time, and with that, the world goes into a period of autumn and winter, and is being separated from the physical world above, and because of that separation, nothing is growing anymore. Things are resting. There, of course, is not a direct parallel and correlation within Celtic mythology for this, but this is as close as it comes to the theme, and this is why this particular myth has come to be associated with the autumnal equinox and why it gives the Sabbat its name. Now, eventually, Mabon was released from his captivity, and he had to be released through force, no less. And this happened when he encountered Coleridge, as well as King Arthur and his companions. They're the ones who took upon themselves to free Mabon, and he actually joined them in helping the quest of Coleridge, who was trying to win over the hand of Olwen in marriage. It was a whole thing, and we will get into that in later videos. And the last thing we're going to touch on today is the idea of the second harvest. Things were beginning to ripen and get harvested around Lunasa, but now by Mabon, everything is in full swing. Crops are being gathered in, farmers are working their tails off, home gardeners are busy as well, because they're not only bringing in all of their produce, they're figuring out how to preserve it, and that's another big theme and part of the preparation for winter. The storing and preserving the foods and making sure that your family is taken care of, you're taken care of, and that everyone's going to make it. But after all this work is done, that's when you finally have that moment where you can relax and just sit back and enjoy all that you've encountered, and of course the changing season, which is starting to give us some relief from the overbearing and quite impolite heat of summer, and moving into something that's more moderate and easier. It's just a breath of fresh air, literally and figuratively. So those are the big themes of Mabon. Next week we're going to be going on to other aspects of it. I think I'll probably go over the correspondences and the various other mythos associated with Mabon in this time of year. And then after that, then I think I'll have a video discussing various ways that Mabon can be celebrated and enjoyed. And then, of course, after that, I think that'll be Mabon itself. So, a lot to do this month. We are getting into a very, very busy time of year as the year is wrapping up, and we're getting ready to go into the holiday seasons, not only for ourselves as pagan, but also for our cultural holidays, because, you know, even though we sometimes like to kind of bitch and moan about how Christianity stole this and Christianity stole that, the reality is that because Christianity stole things from us, that meant that the spirit of some of it has endured throughout all of these centuries, and it has given us, for better or for worse, some common ground with our Christian neighbors, and even for people who are, not pagan, not Christian, not any religion at all, it's still part of our shared cultural heritage. So I think that's going to be a very good thing to focus on in this coming year, not about who took what and where and when and why, but rather look at what we have in common that we can share. This is common ground that we can come around on, and this is a time when we can perhaps wish each other well and treat each other a little bit better than we do ordinarily. So, lots to come. I shall see you in another video. Bye.